This story is titled, My Girlfriend's Friend Called Me a Loser at a Party, and She Just Stood By, so I quietly disappeared from her life. The next day, she was humiliated at a restaurant when her cards got declined after I cut off all financial support. The story even hit the headlines. Hey Reddit, this is my first time posting here. I'm using a throwaway account for obvious reasons, though at this point I honestly don't really care if she ever reads this. This is going to be a long story, so buckle up for the ride. I've spent months debating whether to share this experience with anyone. But after witnessing a similar situation yesterday, I figured maybe my story could help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. Sometimes it takes hearing someone else's experience to realize you're not crazy for having boundaries and self-respect. I'm not entirely sure where this post belongs, but here goes nothing. So, let me start with some background. I'm Marcus, 34 years old, and I own a custom furniture business that I built from absolutely nothing. I started this journey 14 years ago in my parents' garage, making tables from reclaimed wood that I'd salvaged from demolition sites and old barns around town. Back then, I was working 2 different jobs just to make ends meet, doing construction work during the day and building furniture late into the night. For the first 4 years of this venture, I was sleeping maybe 3 hours a night, running on pure determination and way too much coffee. My dad thought I was completely insane for quitting a stable construction job to make what he called fancy tables nobody would buy. My mom was more supportive of my dreams, but I could see the worry in her eyes that I'd end up broke and have to move back home. Looking back, I can't really blame them for their concerns. It was a pretty risky move for someone from our background. My first real breakthrough came when a local restaurant owner happened to see a table I'd made for my sister's apartment. He was so impressed that he commissioned 8 custom tables for his new restaurant. That single order netted me $4,200 in profit, and I used every single cent to buy better tools and equipment. It was the validation I needed that this crazy dream might actually work. Growing up, we never had much money in our household. My dad worked at the same factory for 32 years, putting in long hours and overtime whenever he could get it. My mom cleaned houses for wealthy families across town, coming home exhausted but never complaining. They both busted their asses to make sure we had food on the table and clothes on our backs. But there was never anything extra for luxuries or even small treats. I got my first job at 15, working at the local hardware store after school and on weekends. By 17, I was helping a local contractor on job sites whenever I had free time. I learned more practical skills on those construction sites than I ever did sitting in a classroom. There's something about creating something tangible with your own hands that has always made perfect sense to me, like finding the missing piece of a puzzle you didn't know you were solving. While other kids my age were dreaming about becoming doctors, lawyers, or whatever their parents pushed them toward, I was sketching furniture designs in the margins of my notebooks during boring lectures. My shop teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, was the only adult who ever encouraged this passion. "You've got a gift, Marcus," he used to tell me with genuine conviction. "Don't waste it on what other people think you should do." Fast forward to today, and I now operate out of a 5,500 square foot workshop with 16 dedicated employees. We specialize in creating high-end custom pieces for an impressive clientele that includes celebrities, tech executives, and luxury hotels. Our work commands serious money, anywhere from $12,000 for a custom dining table to $45,000 for complete room sets. I'm not private jet wealthy by any means, but I'm doing pretty damn well for a guy who barely finished high school and grew up in a double-wide trailer. My company has been growing consistently at about 35% year over year for the last 6 years, which still amazes me sometimes when I look at the numbers. 4 years ago, I was able to buy my house outright. Nothing flashy, just a solid 3-bedroom craftsman on a nice quiet street with a big garage that I converted into my personal home workshop. I drive a 2019 F-150 that's usually covered in sawdust and has tools rolling around in the back, exactly how I like it. I've always been smart about money, investing most of my profits back into the business or putting them into real estate investments. Like I said, nothing flashy about my lifestyle, but it's solid and built on a foundation I can be proud of. I've never really cared much about the finer things that seem to obsess other people. Give me a comfortable home, a reliable truck, quality tools that work when I need them, and time to go fishing once in a while, and I'm genuinely content. My ex-fiancée, however, had very different priorities and expectations about what success should look like. I met Victoria, she's 29, at a charity auction where I had donated one of my custom tables for the fundraising event. She works at Pinnacle PR, which is one of those boutique firms that handles image management for wealthy people and luxury brands. She was coordinating the entire event and saw me setting up my piece for display. She came over to introduce herself, and I was immediately struck by how put together she seemed. Victoria was smart, ambitious, and gorgeous in that perfectly polished kind of way that you see in magazines. She had the perfect blowout, designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's rent, and that whole carefully curated Instagram aesthetic down to a science. I'll be completely honest, I was a little starstruck by her attention. She seemed so sophisticated and worldly compared to me, like she belonged in a different league entirely. When she laughed at my admittedly dumb jokes and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my work and my business, I couldn't believe my luck. Here was this incredibly beautiful, successful woman who appeared to be fascinated by what I did for a living. On our first date, she asked so many detailed questions about furniture making, my business operations, and my client base. Looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, I should have realized she was systematically cataloging my financial value rather than actually getting to know me as a person. But at the time, I interpreted her interest as genuine curiosity about my passion. Our early dating life was an absolute whirlwind that swept me off my feet. She took me to restaurants where the menus didn't have prices listed, which should have been my first clue about the expense. She introduced me to people whose names I recognized from business magazines and society pages. It was exciting and intoxicating, I won't lie about that. It made me feel like I was finally moving up in the world, like I was becoming someone important. My buddies were absolutely jealous as hell when they saw her pictures on my phone. "How did you manage to land a woman like that?" They'd joke, slapping me on the back with genuine admiration. I'd laugh it off and play it cool, but secretly I wondered the exact same thing. What did someone like Victoria see in someone like me? The first time I took her to my favorite local burger joint, this hole-in-the-wall place I'd been going to since high school that serves the best burgers in town, she picked at her food like it was contaminated and spent the entire time scrolling through her phone. Later that evening, she gently suggested that we should stick to places on her approved list going forward. I didn't think much of it at the time, just figured she had more refined tastes than I was used to dealing with. We hit it off incredibly well, despite these small differences, and we started dating seriously. Within 8 months, things were getting genuinely serious between us. By our 1-year anniversary, we were engaged and planning our future together. I spent $31,000 on her engagement ring, way more than I was comfortable with, honestly. But she had always dreamed of owning a specific style from Cartier, and I wanted more than anything to make her happy and show her how much she meant to me. For context, before Victoria came into my life, I'd never spent more than $150 on a gift for anyone, including family members. When I told my dad about the ring's price, he nearly had a heart attack and asked if I'd lost my mind. The proposal itself should have been another major red flag that I was too blind to see at the time. I had planned this whole romantic evening at this beautiful state park where we'd had one of our first picnics early in our relationship. I wanted it to be perfect. Sunset overlooking the lake, the whole 9 yards, just the two of us in this meaningful place. She said yes, and I was over the moon with happiness. But later that night, I overheard her on the phone with her best friend Cassandra, complaining bitterly that I hadn't hired a professional photographer to capture the moment for her Instagram feed. The next day, she actually made me recreate the entire proposal in a more aesthetically pleasing location so she could get the perfect shots to post online. That was the first time I felt like I was just a prop in her carefully orchestrated life rather than her actual partner. It was unsettling, but I pushed those feelings down and told myself I was being oversensitive. Looking back now, there were red flags everywhere from day one of our relationship. But you know how it is when you're wearing rose-colored glasses. All those red flags just look like regular flags, and you explain them away because you want to believe in what you have. She was constantly suggesting that I should upgrade my truck to a Range Rover because that's what successful men drive. She thought I should move to a better, more prestigious neighborhood that would reflect my growing business success. She was always pointing out watches that successful entrepreneurs should have and showing me articles about personal branding. Victoria hated when I'd come home with sawdust in my hair or dirt under my fingernails from working in the shop. She was always asking why I needed to continue doing physical work when I could just manage the business operations and keep my hands clean like other executives. She'd introduce me to her friends and colleagues as the furniture guy, like I was some quirky hobby she had picked up rather than a business owner whose company had twice the annual revenue of her PR firm. When I'd bring friends from my pre-Victoria life around, guys I'd worked construction with back in the day, my childhood buddy who runs a successful plumbing business, people who had been part of my journey from the very beginning. She'd be polite and charming to their faces. But later, in private, she'd ask me why I still hung out with people like that when I could be networking with people who actually matter for my business and social advancement. It was as if the people who'd been there for me when I had absolutely nothing suddenly didn't matter anymore now that I was successful. These were guys who'd helped me move equipment, who'd referred customers to me in the early days, who'd celebrated every milestone with genuine happiness for my success. But in Victoria's world, they were just holding me back from reaching my true potential. The first time I took her to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, something I'd been looking forward to because I wanted the most important people in my life to get to know each other, she spent the entire car ride back home critiquing everything. She had opinions about my mom's decor choices, my dad's outdated political opinions, and what she called the quaint neighborhood where I grew up. I found myself defending my parents while simultaneously making excuses for Victoria's behavior, telling myself that she just came from a different world and didn't mean any harm by her observations. I convinced myself that maybe she was just trying to help me see opportunities for growth that I couldn't see myself. There was one particular incident that should have been a wake-up call. My mom called while Victoria and I were at an important dinner with some of her PR friends and potential business contacts. My mom was clearly upset and shaking because my dad had fallen off a ladder while cleaning the gutters and was in the emergency room. It wasn't anything life-threatening, but she was shaken up and needed support. When I told Victoria that I needed to leave immediately to go check on my parents and make sure everything was okay, she made this face. This look of complete annoyance and disbelief. "Can't your sister handle it?" she asked in front of her friends. "We're in the middle of something important here, and this could really benefit your business connections." I went to the hospital anyway, because that's what you do when your family needs you. Victoria didn't speak to me for 3 days afterward, giving me the silent treatment like I was a child being punished for misbehavior. But I was in love, or at least I thought I was. I figured she just wanted the best for me and was trying to help me level up my life and social standing. It's a classic mistake that so many people make when they're being slowly manipulated. You start questioning your own judgment and accepting treatment that you would never tolerate from anyone else. So last month, we're at this cookout at her college friend's place. Brandon and Nicole had just bought a new house in the suburbs, and they were having a casual gathering. Nothing fancy, just burgers, drinks, and good company. There were about 18 people total, a mix of Victoria's PR friends and college acquaintances. I was helping Brandon with his brand new smoker. The poor guy had dropped $2,100 on this fancy setup to impress his boss, but he had absolutely no idea how to actually use the thing. It was honestly pretty funny watching him try to figure it out. Meanwhile, Victoria was off catching up with her PR friends and college buddies, doing her usual social networking routine. I actually really liked Brandon. He seemed like the most down-to-earth person in Victoria's entire social circle, which was saying something. He works in finance but doesn't make his entire personality revolve around money and status like so many others in that world. His wife Nicole is genuinely sweet too. She always makes a real effort to include me in conversations when the others start talking about people and places I don't know anything about. "Thanks for helping with this thing," Brandon said, gesturing helplessly at the complicated smoker. "I watched like 7 different YouTube videos, and I still couldn't figure it out properly." "No problem at all," I told him, adjusting the temperature controls. "My buddy Tony has the exact same model back home. It's really all about understanding the temperature control and airflow. These digital ones are actually trickier to master than the old-school charcoal ones, believe it or not." "Victoria says your business is doing really well," he mentioned casually while we worked on getting the smoker set up properly. "Yeah, I can't complain about how things are going. We've got a waiting list that's about 8 months long now, which is a good problem to have." "That's seriously impressive," he said, and I could tell from his tone that he genuinely meant it. "You ever think about expanding the operation? Maybe opening another location or bringing in partners?" I shrugged, considering the question. "Someday, maybe. Right now, I like keeping things manageable, you know? I'd rather focus on quality over quantity and make sure every piece that leaves our shop is something I'm proud to put my name on." Brandon nodded with understanding. "I really respect that approach. Too many people get caught up in growth for growth's sake and lose sight of what made them successful in the first place." That conversation with Brandon was probably the most genuine, respectful interaction I'd had with anyone from Victoria's social circle since we'd started dating. Most of her friends either completely ignored me or talked to me like I was some kind of curiosity. The blue-collar boyfriend who had somehow managed to infiltrate their sophisticated world. Then Cassandra showed up, and the entire atmosphere of the party shifted. Cassandra is Victoria's best friend from their days at Duke University. If Victoria is polished and put together, then Cassandra is polished, shellacked, and lacquered to an almost artificial shine. Everything about her screams expensive, and she makes absolutely sure that everyone around her knows it. She's constantly dropping casual references to her family's summer house on Lake Tahoe, her boyfriend who's apparently crushing it in cryptocurrency, and the exclusive events she attends. From the very first day I met her, Cassandra has looked down on me because I work with my hands and didn't attend some prestigious university. She's made her disdain pretty clear on multiple occasions. The first time I met Cassandra, she asked what I did for a living with that particular tone that suggested she was already preparing to be unimpressed. When I told her about my custom furniture business and explained what we specialized in, she literally said, "Oh, so you're like a carpenter. How authentic." Then she immediately proceeded to ask if I'd give her a friends and family discount on a dining table for her apartment. When I quoted her my standard price, the same price I charge everyone else for that level of craftsmanship, she actually laughed out loud like I had just told her the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "Oh, I didn't realize you were charging real furniture prices," she said with this condescending smirk. Whatever the hell that was supposed to mean. Cassandra is the kind of person who somehow manages to make every single conversation about herself, no matter what the original topic was. If you mention that you went to Italy for vacation, she'll immediately jump in with an elaborate story about how she spent a semester in Florence during college and practically became a local. If you dare to mention being tired after a long day at work, she'll launch into an epic tale about her 90-hour work weeks and how she's literally surviving on nothing but kombucha and pure determination. In all the time I've known her, I've never once heard Cassandra ask anyone a genuine question about themselves or show any real interest in someone else's life or experiences. So I'm walking over to bring Victoria a fresh, sparkling water, just trying to be a good boyfriend and make sure she's staying hydrated, when I hear Cassandra's voice getting louder and more animated. She's clearly holding court with a small group, and her voice carries across the patio. "Seriously, Vic, another year without going to Europe?" Cassandra is saying dramatically, gesturing with her wine glass. "When are you going to stop pretending to be happy with—" She glances directly at me as I'm approaching with the water, and her voice takes on this particularly nasty tone. "This lifestyle and actually live a little? My God, you're wasting your potential." Victoria laughs nervously and tries to deflect. "We're saving money for the wedding, and I've got some really big client projects coming up that require my full attention." Then Cassandra literally scoffs, makes this disgusted sound like she just smelled something rotten. "God, he's such a basic loser," she says, loud enough for everyone within 20 feet to hear clearly. "No ambition beyond making fancy tables for actually successful people. You could do so much better with your connections and your potential." The entire group goes completely quiet. It's that awkward, funeral quiet silence where everyone suddenly finds their drinks incredibly fascinating, and nobody knows where to look. All eyes turn to me, standing there holding Victoria's sparkling water like I'm trapped in some twisted version of a reality show elimination ceremony. And Victoria, my fiancée, the woman wearing my $31,000 engagement ring, the person I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, she laughs. Not a nervous, uncomfortable laugh that you might excuse as social awkwardness. A genuine, amused laugh like Cassandra had just made the most clever observation. Then she says, "He tries his best," and takes the water from my hand without even bothering to meet my eyes. Like I'm some charity case she's dating out of pity, some project she's taken on to make herself feel better about her privileged life. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about 6 seconds, processing what had just happened. I carefully put my own glass down on the nearest table, grabbed my jacket from the back of a chair, and walked straight out of that party without saying a single word to anyone. I didn't look back, didn't make a scene, didn't try to defend myself or argue. I just got in my truck and drove home in complete silence. I remember sitting at a red light about halfway home, my hands actually shaking on the steering wheel as the full weight of what had just occurred started to sink in. I found myself thinking about all the times Victoria had made those little comments that I'd brushed off or explained away. Suddenly, they all made perfect sense in this new, horrible light. How she'd say things like, "You're doing so well for someone without a college degree," or "Your business is really impressive, considering where you started from." There were always these little qualifiers, these subtle put-downs disguised as compliments that I'd ignored because I thought she was just being encouraging. But now I could see them for what they really were. She thought I was beneath her, and she was settling for me. She saw our entire relationship as some kind of charitable act on her part. There was this one incident about a year into our relationship that suddenly took on a completely different meaning. We ran into one of her ex-boyfriends at an upscale restaurant downtown. This guy was some investment banker type, expensive tailored suit, slicked back hair, the whole Wall Street stereotype. Victoria introduced me as Marcus. He makes furniture. Not her boyfriend. Not the owner of a successful business that employs 16 people. Just, he makes furniture, like I was some guy with a hobby. The way she looked at that ex-boyfriend, all sparkling eyes and giggles, flirting right in front of me like I wasn't even there. That should have told me everything I needed to know about how she really felt about me and our relationship. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone was going absolutely nuts. 17 missed calls and 31 text messages from Victoria, all coming in rapid-fire succession. Where did you go? You're embarrassing me by leaving like this. Stop being so sensitive about everything. You're making a scene without even being here. Call me right now, we need to talk about this. Not a single message asking if I was okay. Not one word of apology about what Cassandra had said or how Victoria had responded to it. Nothing acknowledging that her friend had just called me a basic loser to my face while she laughed and agreed. Just anger and indignation that I had somehow embarrassed her by refusing to stand there and take that kind of treatment. I turned my phone completely off and went to bed, emotionally exhausted from the entire ordeal. I got up at 5 a.m. the next morning, just like I do every single day. I went on my usual 6-mile run through the neighborhood, took a long hot shower, and made my protein shake. My morning routine has always been my anchor, the thing that keeps me grounded and centered no matter what kind of chaos might be happening in other areas of my life. When I finally turned my phone back on after my workout, there were 48 more messages waiting for me. The tone of Victoria's texts had shifted dramatically throughout the night, cycling through different emotional manipulation tactics like she was working from some kind of playbook. The most recent messages had changed from anger to what appeared to be desperation. "I'm coming over. Open the door." "Why aren't you answering me?" "This is so childish, Marcus." I texted back exactly one sentence. "I'll talk when you're ready to act like an adult." Before Victoria arrived at my house, I sat on my back deck with my morning coffee, trying to process everything that had happened and what it meant for our relationship. I realized that I'd been slowly compromising who I was for years, gradually changing how I dressed, where I ate, who I spent time with, all in an effort to fit into her world and make her happy. And in return for all those sacrifices and changes, she couldn't even defend me when her friend insulted me to my face. That spoke volumes about how she really saw me and our relationship. I thought about my dad and how he'd look at me if he could see how I'd been letting myself be treated. He wasn't a perfect man by any means, but he had pride and self-respect. He never let anyone look down on him for making an honest living or doing hard work with his hands. What would he think of his son letting some PR princess and her snotty friend mock the business he'd built from absolutely nothing? Victoria showed up at my door 35 minutes after I'd sent that text, all fired up and ready for a confrontation. She was wearing her expensive Lululemon workout gear, looking like she'd just stepped out of a fitness influencer's Instagram story. "What the actual hell, Marcus?" she yelled, barging into my house without waiting for an invitation. "You just walked out and left me to deal with everyone asking where you went and what happened. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me?" "Sounds rough," I said calmly, leaning against my kitchen island with my arms crossed. "Having to explain why your fiancé left after being insulted to his face by your best friend." "You're being absolutely ridiculous," she huffed dramatically. "It was just Cassandra being Cassandra. You know how she gets when she's had a few drinks. And you? What's your excuse for laughing and saying I try my best? Were you just being Victoria being Victoria?" "Oh my God, I was just trying to defuse the situation," she exploded. "Why are you making such a huge deal out of this? It was one comment at a stupid party." "Because my fiancé just showed me exactly what she thinks of me in front of all her friends," I replied evenly. 2.5 years together, a $31,000 engagement ring on your finger, and you couldn't be bothered to say, "Don't talk about the man I'm going to marry that way." She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might actually fall out of her head. So what? I'm supposed to cause a scene every time Cassandra says something a little mean? That's just how she is, and everyone knows it. No, that's how you allow her to be. There's a big difference between those two things. This is so stupid, she muttered, checking her Apple Watch like she had somewhere more important to be. I have a client meeting in 3 hours, so can we please just move past this drama? Don't worry, I'll make this quick, I said. We're done. Her head snapped up from her watch and I could see the shock registering on her face. Excuse me? What did you just say? We're done, Victoria. The engagement is off. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression shifting from annoyed to genuinely shocked. You can't be serious right now. You're breaking up with me over one comment from Cassandra? No, I'm breaking up with you because when someone called me a basic loser to my face, the woman who's wearing my ring laughed and agreed with her. That tells me everything I need to know about how you really see me and what you think of our relationship. This is absolutely insane, she shouted, her voice getting higher and more frantic. You're throwing away our entire relationship over nothing, over a stupid misunderstanding. It's not nothing, I said firmly. It's called self-respect. Marcus, baby, she tried, her voice suddenly going soft and manipulative as she approached me with her hands outstretched. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. I really wasn't thinking clearly in that moment. Let's just move past this, okay? We have that important dinner with my boss next week. You should wear that blue Burberry shirt I got you for Christmas. You look so handsome in it. I stepped back, maintaining distance between us. I won't be attending that dinner or any other events with you. Her face hardened instantly, the fake sweetness evaporating like it had never existed. What about the venue deposit? We already put down $8,000. The save the date cards went out last month to over 200 people. My parents already paid the caterer $14,000 and it's completely non-refundable. You should have thought about all of that before you showed your true colors, I replied calmly. You're being so fucking dramatic, she exploded, throwing her hands up in exasperation. It was one stupid joke between friends. You know how much this wedding means to me. I've been planning every detail for 15 months. That statement was particularly telling. Not how much we meant to each other, or how much our relationship meant to her. Just the wedding, the event itself, the photos and the status symbol and the Instagram content it would provide. What about the honeymoon? She demanded desperately. The tickets to Bali are non-refundable. We're supposed to leave in 6 weeks, and I've already told everyone about it. I'm sure Cassandra would love to go with you, I replied without missing a beat. You two can take all the Instagram photos you want and talk about what a basic loser I am while you're sipping cocktails on the beach. She gasped like I had physically slapped her across the face. How dare you say that to me? After everything I've done for you over the past 2 years, I've introduced you to people who would never have given you the time of day otherwise. I've helped elevate your image and your social standing. I've made you relevant in circles that actually matter. And there it was. The mask completely dropped, revealing exactly what she really thought about our relationship. In her mind, she had been doing me some kind of massive favor by being with me, like I was some charity case she'd taken on as a personal improvement project. I think you should leave, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. Fine, she screamed, grabbing her purse and storming toward the door. But don't come crawling back when you realize what you've thrown away. Good luck finding someone else willing to put up with your sawdust and your blue-collar attitude. That was her final parting shot. Your sawdust. The physical evidence of the work I do with my hands, the business I built from nothing, the life I created for myself through dedication and skill. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. She was trying to use my success as an insult. Victoria tried everything in her manipulation playbook after that. She attempted crying, but there were no actual tears, just dramatic sobbing sounds and perfectly timed sniffles. When that didn't work, she switched to screaming and throwing accusations. Then came the guilt tripping about all the money that had been spent and all the people who would be disappointed. Finally, she tried love bombing, telling me how much she loved me and how perfect we were together. When none of her usual tactics worked on me, she stormed out of my house, slamming the front door so hard that my neighbor actually texted me 10 minutes later to ask if everything was okay. Over the next few days, I completely ignored her constant calls and text messages. Instead, I focused my energy on a $35,000 conference table commission I had for some tech startup. I hit my home gym twice a day, working out my frustrations on the weights and punching bag. I told my shop manager that I'd be working from home for a while, handling design work and client consultations only while I sorted through my personal situation. I needed time to systematically pack up all of Victoria's belongings from my place and gather my things from her downtown condo. Thankfully, we had never officially moved in together, but after 2.5 years of dating, our possessions had become thoroughly mixed up between both places. I was methodical and organized about the whole process, boxing everything neatly and making detailed inventory lists of what belonged to whom. The $31,000 engagement ring that she'd left on my bathroom counter the last time she'd stayed over went straight into my gun safe for safekeeping. I also spent a lot of time reflecting on how I'd ended up with someone who clearly viewed me as a project to fix rather than a partner to love and respect. My buddy Tony, who runs the plumbing business I mentioned earlier, came over one evening and we talked until 3 in the morning about the whole situation. Tony had never particularly liked Victoria, but he'd kept his opinions to himself because he thought I was genuinely happy with her. "She never looked at you like you were enough, man," he told me honestly. "Always like you were some kind of rough draft that she was constantly editing and trying to improve." That observation hit me harder than I expected because it was absolutely true. Tony reminded me of something I had completely forgotten in all the drama. About 3 years ago, I'd been commissioned to build a custom conference table for the governor's office. A massive honor and a huge deal for my business. It even got written up in the local newspaper, and I was incredibly proud of the recognition. Victoria hadn't come to the installation ceremony because she claimed she had an important client meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. Later, I found out from a mutual friend that she'd actually been at an all-day spa retreat with Cassandra, getting massages and facials. When I confronted her about lying to me, she shrugged it off and said, "I didn't think it was that important. It's just a table, Marcus. Just a table. Not the culmination of years of hard work and skill development. Not a vindication of my decision to leave stable employment and start my own business. Not recognition from the highest office in the state. Just a table." On the 3rd day after our breakup, I discovered something that made my blood boil. Victoria had posted a long, carefully crafted paragraph on Instagram about being publicly humiliated by her fiancé, who had abandoned her at a social gathering over a harmless joke. She painted herself as the victim of my toxic masculinity and emotional immaturity, claiming she was completely blindsided by my reaction. Her comment section was absolutely blowing up with support from her PR friends and sorority sisters, all offering their sympathy and outrage on her behalf. They were calling me controlling, insecure, and fragile, all based on her completely one-sided version of events where she conveniently left out the part about laughing when her friend called me a basic loser. Cassandra's comment was especially rich and infuriating. "You're too good for him anyway, babe. Men who can't take a joke are walking red flags. Now you can finally get yourself a real man who matches your ambition and sophistication." I didn't respond to any of it online. I'm not the type to air my dirty laundry on social media or get into public arguments with ex-girlfriends. Instead, I sent Victoria a simple, direct text message. "I'll be dropping your things off tomorrow at 7 p.m. The engagement ring is in the small box with your name on it. Please have my vintage leather jacket, my tools, and the signed baseball ready for pickup." She replied immediately, clearly having been waiting by her phone. "We need to talk about this face-to-face. Stop hiding from me and running away from our problems." I didn't take the bait or engage with her attempts to draw me into more drama. I simply repeated my message. 7 p.m. Have my stuff ready. What followed was a string of increasingly desperate messages from her, trying every possible angle to get me to engage. She threatened to tell her side of the story to all our mutual friends, as if she hadn't already done exactly that on Instagram. She said she was worried about my mental health and thought I might be having some kind of breakdown. Classic gaslighting behavior. Then she suggested we should go to couples therapy to work through our communication issues, which was laughable considering we were already broken up. Finally, she offered to forgive me if I apologized for overreacting and promised it would never happen again. I didn't respond to any of these messages. She was clearly trying to maintain control of the narrative and keep me emotionally invested in our relationship drama. Several mutual friends started reaching out to me, and most of them were taking her side without even bothering to ask for my perspective on what had actually happened. One guy I'd known for years texted me, "Dude, you can't just walk out on your fiancé over nothing. Man up and apologize before you lose the best thing that ever happened to you." I blocked him immediately. I didn't have the energy or desire to explain myself to people who had already made up their minds based on Victoria's social media propaganda. A few people were more measured in their approach, asking what had actually happened and whether I was okay. But I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to explain the whole situation to everyone. I figured the truth would come out eventually, and the people who really mattered would understand. I threw myself into physical exercise harder than I had in years, using the gym as an outlet for all my frustration and anger. I also started sketching designs for furniture pieces I'd always wanted to create, but never had the time for: intricate, artistic pieces that were more about personal expression than commercial viability. There was something deeply cathartic about the creative process, about taking raw, imperfect materials and transforming them into something beautiful and functional. There's probably a metaphor in there somewhere about rebuilding your life after toxic relationships. When I arrived at Victoria's downtown condo the next evening at exactly 7 o'clock, she was clearly waiting for me and had prepared for this encounter like it was a military operation. She had done herself up completely. Hair professionally blown out, full makeup that probably took an hour to apply. And she was wearing that black dress she knew I had always found particularly attractive on her. The expensive perfume she was wearing filled the entire room, creating this overwhelming cloud of scent that was obviously meant to trigger positive memories. These were classic Victoria manipulation tactics that I'd seen work on me far too many times before, but now I could see them for exactly what they were. "Marcus," she started, her voice deliberately gentle and vulnerable. "This whole situation has gone way too far. We really need to talk about what happened and work through this together." "I'm just here to pick up my belongings," I said firmly, placing the neatly organized boxes of her things in the entryway of her condo. "Nothing more, nothing less." "Please," she said, her eyes wide and pleading. "Just give me 12 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. 12 minutes to explain myself and fix this misunderstanding between us." I checked my watch deliberately. 12 minutes. She launched into what was obviously a carefully rehearsed speech about how deeply sorry she was for everything that had happened. She explained that she'd been completely caught off guard by Cassandra's rudeness and hadn't known how to respond appropriately in the moment. She claimed she'd spent days reflecting deeply on her behavior and had come to realize that she needed to set much better boundaries with toxic friends who didn't respect our relationship. "I've even texted Cassandra already," she continued earnestly. "I told her that she needs to apologize to you personally for what she said. She's agreed to meet us for brunch this Sunday so she can make things right between all of us." I almost laughed out loud at the absurdity of it. "You still don't get it, do you? I know this isn't really about Cassandra," she said quickly, clearly trying to stay on script. "It's about my reaction to what she said, and I'm truly, genuinely sorry, Marcus. I promise you it will never happen again. I've learned from this experience." "You're absolutely right about that," I said, looking around her condo. "It will never happen again. Now where are my things?" She blinked several times, clearly thrown off her prepared script. I thought we'd be resolving this situation tonight. I thought we'd be getting back together. The only thing that needs resolving is the return of my personal possessions. Where's my signed Derek Jeter baseball? My grandfather gave me that before he died, and it means everything to me." She crossed her arms defensively and took a step back. "I don't know where it is right now. We can look for it together after we fix things between us and get our relationship back on track." That's when I knew with absolute certainty that she was holding my most precious belongings hostage to try to keep me emotionally engaged and force me to stay longer. "There's nothing to fix, Victoria. We're done. This relationship is over." "Marcus, please," she said, suddenly switching to tears that appeared right on cue. "I love you more than anything. Doesn't that count for something? Doesn't our entire history together mean anything to you?" "Love without respect isn't actually love," I told her calmly. "It's just convenience and manipulation." Her carefully constructed facade of vulnerability suddenly shifted to pure anger, like a switch had been flipped. "Fine! You want to throw away everything we've built together because your fragile ego got bruised? Go ahead! Good luck finding someone else who puts up with your blue-collar lifestyle and your complete refusal to network or advance yourself professionally." I nodded calmly. "Thank you for confirming that I made the right decision." "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "When you're old and alone with nothing but your precious sawdust for company, you'll remember the woman who tried to make you better than you are." "Better?" I repeated, genuinely curious. "Or just different? More like the men in your social circle?" I paused at her door and turned back to ask her one final question. "Tell me something, Victoria. If I had shown up at that cookout wearing a designer suit with an Ivy League degree and a corner office in some corporate tower, Would Cassandra still have called me a loser? Would you still have laughed and agreed with her? She didn't answer, but the expression on her face told me everything I needed to know. The silence spoke volumes. As I headed toward the door, she played what she clearly thought was her final trump card. What about our trip to Bali next month? The flights cost $4,800, and they're completely non-refundable. The villa is already paid for in full. Everyone's expecting us to post photos from our romantic getaway. I turned back one more time. Everyone? You mean your Instagram followers? Cassandra? Your PR friends who need content for their feeds? Her silence was answer enough. Enjoy Indonesia, I said, closing the door behind me and walking away for good. As I drove home through the city streets, I felt this strange mixture of profound sadness and overwhelming relief washing over me. I was sad that the person I thought I'd spend my life with had never actually existed. She was just a carefully constructed illusion designed to manipulate me. But I was also deeply relieved to finally be free of the constant, subtle undermining and the persistent feeling that I was never quite good enough, no matter how successful my business became or how much money I earned. I realized that I'd been holding my breath for 2.5 years, constantly trying to measure up to a standard that kept moving every time I got close to reaching it. It was exhausting living like that, always feeling like I was being evaluated and found wanting. The social media fallout was brutal but completely predictable. Victoria posted more carefully crafted content, painting me as the villain in our relationship story. More mutual friends took sides, mostly hers since she was much better at managing public perception than I was. Her mother even called me to tell me I was making a catastrophic mistake over what she called a tiny misunderstanding, and that I'd never find anyone like Victoria again. Thank God for that, I muttered after hanging up on her. I stayed completely quiet throughout all of this drama, focusing entirely on my business and personal well-being. I started reconnecting with old friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Victoria. Guys from my neighborhood who'd known me since before I had any money or success. We went fishing, talked about life, and laughed about old times. Nobody asked me about my personal brand or suggested I needed a lifestyle makeover. It was like remembering who I really was after years of slow, systematic erasure of my authentic self. I even started taking an evening woodworking class at the local community college. Not because I needed to learn new skills for my business. Obviously, I already knew what I was doing, but for the sense of community and shared passion. I made some genuinely good friends there who appreciated true craftsmanship and didn't care what brand of watch I wore or whether I drove a luxury vehicle. I reconnected with people from my old neighborhood, guys I'd grown up with who had witnessed my entire journey from the very beginning. They'd seen me hustling and grinding when I had absolutely nothing, working multiple jobs and sleeping 3 hours a night to chase my dream. We started hanging out regularly again, going fishing on weekends, grabbing beers after work, talking and laughing about old times and shared memories. None of these guys asked me about my personal brand or suggested I needed a complete makeover to be acceptable in polite society. They valued me for who I actually was, not who they thought I should become. My sister came over one weekend to help me rearrange my house and get rid of all the little decorative touches Victoria had gradually added over the years. Things that had never felt quite right, but that I'd accepted because I wanted to make her happy. We spent the day moving furniture, changing out artwork, and basically reclaiming my space. "You seem so much lighter," my sister told me as we were finishing up. "Like you just got out from under something really heavy that was weighing you down." She was absolutely right. I hadn't fully realized how emotionally exhausting it had been to constantly try to be someone I wasn't, always feeling like I was being judged and evaluated against impossible standards. About 4 weeks after our breakup, something interesting happened. Victoria's tone on social media started to shift dramatically. She stopped posting angry, bitter content about me and our failed relationship. Instead, she began sharing inspirational quotes about recognizing your worth and letting go of relationships that no longer serve your growth. It was a classic rebranding effort, typical of someone in her PR profession. Then one evening, completely out of the blue, Nicole, Brandon's wife from the cookout, called me. "Marcus, there's something important you should know about what happened after you left that party." "I'm listening," I said, genuinely curious about what she had to tell me. "After you walked out, Cassandra went completely off the rails. She spent at least 35 minutes absolutely trashing you to anyone who would listen, saying the most horrible things. She kept going on and on about how Victoria was wasting her life and her potential with a furniture maker when she could be dating hedge fund managers and tech executives instead." "That sounds about right for Cassandra," I replied. "Brandon finally told her to shut up or get out of our house. She went absolutely ballistic, screaming about how Victoria deserved so much better than some loser with sawdust under his fingernails who would never fit in with the right kind of people. That's when Victoria finally tried to defend you, but honestly, Marcus, it seemed completely fake and way too little. Too late. I appreciate you telling me this, I said, but that's not really why you're calling, is it? You're right. There's more, and it's much worse than just Cassandra's usual nastiness. That trip to Bali that Victoria keeps talking about on social media, Nicole continued. She's been telling everyone it was going to be a surprise engagement trip, but not the kind you're thinking of. I was confused. What do you mean? We were already engaged. I gave her a $31,000 ring over a year ago. Not your engagement to her, Marcus, her engagement to you. What the hell are you talking about? I asked, completely baffled. Nicole sighed heavily. She's been telling everyone in her circle that you weren't taking the relationship seriously enough, that you were dragging your feet about making a real commitment. She was planning to propose to you in Bali to move things along and force you to get more serious about your future together. She had already hired a professional photographer to capture the moment for her Instagram content. I felt like I was living in some kind of alternate reality. But Nicole, I already proposed to her. I already gave her an engagement ring that cost more than most people's cars, which she's been telling everyone she had to settle for because you wouldn't let her help pick out something worthy of her brand and her social media image. I was absolutely stunned by the level of delusion and manipulation I was hearing about. But apparently there was even more to this twisted story. Remember how Victoria was always posting pictures of those designer bags and expensive shoes on her Instagram? Nicole asked. Yeah, of course. She was always showing off her latest purchases. Marcus, she can't afford any of that stuff on her PR salary. She's been maxing out credit cards in your name for over 14 months, using them for what she calls image maintenance. I felt like someone had just punched me in the gut and knocked all the air out of my lungs. What did you just say? She didn't need you to open joint accounts or anything like that. She's been taking pictures of your credit cards and ID while you were sleeping, then using that information to open new accounts. Brandon overheard her bragging to Cassandra about it at the party. How she's been investing in her future by building the right image now, and how once you two were married, your furniture business would finally be put to good use, funding her lifestyle and social media presence. I immediately put Nicole on hold and checked my credit report on my phone. Sure enough, there were 4 different credit cards that I had never opened, all maxed out at $22,000 limits. The charges were for designer clothes, spa treatments, first-class flight upgrades, and expensive restaurants where she'd claimed to be taking clients, but were actually girls' nights out with Cassandra. There's even more, Nicole continued when I got back on the line. That big business connection she was always talking about, the one that was supposedly going to take your furniture business to the next level, it's completely fake. She and Cassandra cooked up that whole story to make you think she was essential to your future success. They figured that once you were married, you'd be so grateful for her connections that you'd happily fund their influencer lifestyle and social media dreams. All the pieces suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Victoria's constant dissatisfaction with my perfectly successful business, her persistent pushing for me to make new connections through her network, the subtle digs about my clothes, my truck, and my house. All while she was secretly stealing from me and planning to use my business as her personal ATM. Why are you telling me all of this? I asked Nicole, genuinely grateful but curious about her motivations. Because you seem like a genuinely good guy who got caught up with someone incredibly toxic, and because what they did to you, they'll probably do to someone else eventually. Brandon and I have completely cut them both out of our lives after what we heard that night. We want nothing to do with either of them. I appreciate this more than you know, I told Nicole sincerely. There's one last thing, Nicole added. Check your email in about an hour. I'm sending you screenshots of text message conversations between Victoria and Cassandra that Brandon discovered when he was helping Cassandra with her phone at the party. She had left it unlocked and he saw your name mentioned, so he looked closer. He feels absolutely terrible about not saying something to you sooner. The email arrived exactly 1 hour later, and reading through those screenshots made me physically sick to my stomach. There were actual photos of my credit cards that Victoria had taken while I was sleeping. There were jokes between her and Cassandra about how I was their meal ticket and their path to financial freedom. There were detailed plans for how they would completely redecorate my house once Victoria moved in permanently after our wedding. Most disturbing of all was a shared Pinterest board they had created called Marcus's Makeover, which included expensive suits, luxury watches, and even plastic surgery consultation information for procedures they thought I needed to improve my appearance. The most revealing exchange was from just 3 days before the cookout that had ended our relationship. Cassandra: when are you going to drop this whole charade and find someone actually on your level? Watching you pretend to be interested in furniture and woodworking is honestly painful to watch. Victoria: after the wedding, once I'm legally entitled to half of his business assets, I can start making the changes I want. He'll be too grateful to have me as his wife to notice what's happening. Cassandra: at least get him to shave that beard and buy some decent clothes before the Bali trip. I can't be tagged in photos with him looking like some kind of lumberjack. Victoria: working on it. Baby steps. Once we're married, the real transformation begins. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my laptop screen for a very long time after reading those messages. Part of me still couldn't believe that someone could be so calculating and fake for years while maintaining such a convincing facade. Another part of me was deeply relieved to have concrete, undeniable proof that I hadn't overreacted at that cookout. My gut instinct had been absolutely right about who Victoria really was. I called my lawyer first thing the next morning and explained the entire situation. Within a week of discovering the credit card fraud, I was fully prepared for what came next. I had reported the fraud to all the relevant authorities, frozen my credit to prevent any additional unauthorized accounts, and gathered all the evidence I needed, including the text messages and emails between Victoria and Cassandra that detailed their elaborate schemes. My lawyer was confident that we had a rock-solid case for criminal charges if I wanted to pursue them legally. But I had a much better idea for how to handle this situation. The Johnson contract was a huge deal. A $195,000 commission to furnish an entire luxury beach house in the Hamptons. It was something Victoria had been desperately trying to get involved with for months, constantly insisting that her PR expertise was absolutely essential to landing these types of high-end, prestigious clients. This was despite the fact that I'd been successfully getting similar contracts just fine before she came into my life. Diane Johnson was a renowned interior designer who worked with celebrities and wealthy clients. She had discovered my work through Instagram and commissioned me to create custom furniture for this massive project. It was the biggest single contract in my company's history, and I was incredibly proud to have earned it based purely on the quality of my craftsmanship. Right on schedule, Victoria showed up at my workshop completely unannounced one afternoon. My shop manager tried to stop her at the entrance, but she pushed past him with her usual sense of entitlement. "We need to talk right now," she insisted, tapping her foot impatiently while I continued working. "It's about the Johnson contract, and it's extremely important." "I'm busy right now, Victoria," I said calmly, continuing to sand the table I was working on without looking up at her. "The Johnsons specifically asked for me to be involved in the final presentation," she continued, her voice taking on that entitled tone I'd grown to hate. "I've been telling them about our engagement for months, building up the relationship and managing expectations. They're expecting both of us to be at the meeting tomorrow, and I've already confirmed our attendance." "Have you now?" I asked, still not bothering to look up from my work. "They're expecting both of us at the presentation tomorrow afternoon. This is a huge opportunity for your business, and my PR expertise is exactly what you need to close this deal successfully." I finally stopped what I was doing and looked directly at her. "Victoria, I know about the credit cards." The color completely drained from her face as if someone had just turned off a light switch. That's not... I can explain everything, Marcus. No need for explanations," I said calmly, reaching into my workbench drawer. "I've already explained everything to the police, my lawyer, the credit card companies, and most importantly, to Diane Johnson and her team." I handed her a thick folder containing all the evidence I'd gathered. Credit card statements, screenshots of her text conversations with Cassandra, bank records, everything documenting her fraud and manipulation. "Marcus, please," she started to cry, but these seemed like real tears for once. It wasn't stealing. I was building connections and relationships for both of us. I was investing in our future together. "You have two options here," I told her matter-of-factly. "Option 1. I press full criminal charges for identity theft and credit card fraud. Option 2. You immediately transfer all those balances to your own credit cards, make a public apology on social media admitting what you did, and leave town permanently." She stared at the evidence in the folder for a long moment, probably calculating her chances of fighting the charges versus accepting the consequences of her actions. She chose option 2. Victoria made a tearful Instagram confession about her mistakes and poor judgment, though she carefully avoided using words like fraud or theft. She transferred the debt to her own accounts and left for Pennsylvania to live with her parents within 2 weeks. Her PR firm fired her immediately after I showed them evidence of her fraudulent activities and how she'd been using company resources for personal schemes. Cassandra's cryptocurrency millionaire boyfriend dumped her when he discovered her own financial scams and manipulation tactics. The Johnson contract ended up leading to 4 more major clients who were impressed with both my craftsmanship and my professionalism. Word travels fast in those circles, and apparently my handling of the Victoria situation had actually enhanced my reputation rather than damaged it. I used the success from these contracts to expand my workshop and hire 6 additional skilled craftsmen. I sold the $31,000 engagement ring and used the money to buy a beautiful lake cabin. The perfect weekend getaway for fishing, relaxation, and eventually bringing my new girlfriend, Jessica. Jessica is an architect I met in my evening woodworking class. She genuinely appreciates real craftsmanship and quality work. She's never once suggested that I try my best or that I need to change anything about who I am. She loves the fact that I work with my hands and create beautiful things from raw materials. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even with people who wronged you. It's about getting away from toxic situations, leveling up your life on your own terms, and letting karma handle the rest while you focus on building something real and meaningful. Trust your instincts, stand up for yourself, and never let anyone convince you that self-respect is negotiable. You deserve better than people who see you as a project to fix rather than a partner to love and respect.